transferring ownership in a dealership is real easy. However, turning over leadership in a dealership is not a simple task, and it requires years of careful preparation. And this is most critical. We have to identify that management successor. All right. We have to provide for the cash needs of the owner post-retirement. We then have to look at different options for funding that transfer, whether the dealer is going to continue to rent the property to the next generation, or whether he's going to sell out completely and collect a note, or he's going to get cashed out completely by a third party, just buying them out. Then what are you going to do with the funds there? We're getting into step 6, down to the meat of the issue, which is identifying options for transferring the ownership. Then we're down to step 7 before I've talked about estate taxes at all. We develop and implement a strategy. Then most important is a contingency plan. He was in no hurry. He said, look, I'm 52 years old. At 65, I need to have a plan. Let's talk about this. And I don't have any family members that are going to take over the business. And we see that very, very frequently. What we see is the dealer's children, if you will, have gone to college. They've become doctors or lawyers or accountants or engineers. They have other things they want to do, whatever that is. They have no desire to come back into the dealership. Over to the contingency plan. And the contingency plan there is typically in place for, hey, what if you get sick? What if you're disabled? What if you prematurely pass away? What's going to happen with the dealership? In this case, he had a health scare. Everything was fine. He didn't get sick. He wasn't disabled. He didn't pass away prematurely. But we kicked the contingency plan in. And by age 54, actually, we did 4 transactions. We closed 4 dealership transactions the week of the Super Bowl last year, and his was one of them where he hit the ground. And it was totally unexpected. The spouse, the wife, had no background in the business, had no knowledge how to interact with the manufacturer, had no knowledge how to run this business, and all at once, she's in charge of making payroll, you know, the whole deal. And it really became very difficult for her because she went from at times being mad at her deceased husband for putting her in this position. So that contingency plan is very very important. And then this isn't a one and done. Step 10 is where we actually keep tabs on the plan, on the plan that we put in place. And we typically do that once a year. It may be a very short, hey, let's review this, has anything changed? You know, have any of your plans changed? Whatever that is, from that perspective. Turning over, as I said before we got the slides up, transferring ownership is the easy part. We can do that. We can get with the attorney or the accountant, and we can get that done. That's easy. The hard part is actually the succession planning from an operational standpoint, and it does require a succession plan. And a succession plan is a detailed. Sorry. A succession plan is a detailed business strategy that identifies potential leadership successors within the dealership and positions them to lead while also slowly transitioning out existing leadership, that's the old guys, if you will, over a certain time period, and must be part of your overall dealership strategic plan. Also designed to streamline this process, a succession plan ensures a strong business leaves the hands of one set of owners and remains a strong business in the hands of the next set of owners. And why is that so important? Too many times, most frequently, the owners that are exiting very, very frequently aren't completely cashed out. they have some tie back to the old business. And sometimes that tie is just simply, hey, we're collecting a rent check. Well, you aren't going to get that rent check if the next leader, next owner, or next leader bankrupts the company, right? It gets more complicated. Oftentimes the seller, the selling dealer, or the retiring dealer has a note or some deferred compensation or any combination of these things. So it's very, very vital that the dealership be able to pay those obligations, or that successor leaders are able to do that. We don't want the business to completely lose value the instant that the child or a longtime employee takes control. And that's because many times these future payments going to the exiting dealer are tied to the success of the ongoing business. For succession planning to work, owners and successors must be very specific in their expectations. And one of the problems that we have sometimes is there's not agreement between the new set of leaders and the exiting set of leaders. So we need to have a discussion, for example, on how much time is the successor and the dealer going to spend together. Okay, if we start at age 50 and we identify the wrong successor, we have an opportunity to start over. If we start at age 70, 75, 80, it becomes much more difficult to have a false start, right? Another item that has to be addressed is how are conflicts between the old regime and this new regime in training, if you will. How are those going to be resolved? And ultimately, who's going to make which sets of decisions? We had a dealer, I'll call him Jim. He had no immediate plans to retire. And his view, quite honestly, was that my hobby's my business. And we see that frequently as well. But about 20, 25 years ago, we met with Jim and started this planning to ensure that his family would be financially secure when he died. Okay. About 10 years ago, we began grooming the next generation of leadership, and that happened to be his sons to take over the business. A few years ago, he hired us to arrange a legal and orderly management transition when he actually leaves the business. One of the problems that a lot of dealers have with transition planning is from both a financial and a personal perspective is actually you have to be able to contemplate your own death, or at least giving up the reins of the dealership. Realistically, both things have you have to consider both things as you're going through this. I basically tell dealers frequently, just you got to face facts. This stuff is going to happen at some point. Take for example, we had a dealer in Ohio. Dad was 90 plus years old. Okay, still owned the dealership. He had 3 sons. One of the sons, and the relationship between Dad and the sons at times could be a little frictional. And Mom was that glue that held the family together. Mom passed away. We've got a dealer age 90 plus. Okay, he had promised the store, okay, to 2 of his sons who had gone into the business. One of them had literally gotten out of college, worked there the entire time, and was running things in Dad's absence. Promised it to these guys. Well, let's do a little math here. If Dad's 90, kids are retirement age, okay, and that's what they were looking at. So I'm meeting with this family dynamic. Dad at 90 is going through some dementia issues. The 3rd son I haven't mentioned. So we got 2 sons in the business. We got the 3rd son. The 3rd son's a farmer. Okay, Dad's already basically given him the farm. All right. Well, now Dad, the 90-year-old father, we worked through things, we put a plan together. Dad says, well, wait a minute, my grandsons are, this is the other dynamic that I didn't fail to mention, is that the farmers, the son who's a farmer, his sons have opened up an OPE store about a mile away, competing with the OPE, direct competition with Grandpa's business, the uncle's business, if you will. Well, the 90-year-old father says, wait a minute, Billy Bob and Toby, the two grandsons, I just made those names up, by the way. Billy Bob and Toby are in this same business. Wouldn't it be great if we just gave them the dealership? It'd make their dealership that much stronger and so forth. Well, what effectively happened there? The sons, the two sons that worked in the business, were effectively disinherited. They got nothing out of this. They had put their entire life into it, and they had planned on their retirement being ultimately liquidating the business, because they didn't have any children in the business at all, and they knew they were going to sell it outside. So that's not a good situation, and Thanksgiving dinners have been a little rough after that's occurred. You know, I also want to talk about the importance of this is another transaction we did, or another planning that we did with a dealer. And we met with this dealer. This happened to be a very large dealership group. We met with the dealer, and it was interesting how it was formed. So I'll give you a little bit of history on that. So 3 brothers formed the dealership back in the 50s, okay? And 2 of the 3 brothers were much older, and they passed away. The other brother continued going on, and his nephew was his partner. Well, as the one brother continued to get older and older, as we do, the nephew took over. The nephew actually is about my age, okay? So he's 57, 58, 59, something in that range, years old. And he basically has been running the business for the last dozen years or so solo. The uncle hasn't been around. As a matter of fact, it's been longer ago than that. And he is responsible for a lot of the growth, new markets, and so forth. A lot of that growth is directly related to him. Well, what we had in that situation is the uncle passed away, okay? And he passed away about 8 years ago or so. So the prior dozen years, the nephew was running it. The last 8 years, he's clearly been running it. But the first uncle, or the uncle that passed away about 8 years ago, he had done some estate planning. His attorney did a wonderful job of estate planning. There was no estate tax due when the uncle passed away. It was a wonderful thing. Not. Because what happened was, and you'll see the rest of the story as we go forward, what happened was this estate planning attorney solved the estate planning problem, but created a nightmare from a succession planning and what was ultimately supposed to happen. The clear understanding was that the nephew was going to get 51% of the store upon the uncle's passing, right? He was going to be in control, right? Unfortunately, what happened was the estate planning attorney created a trust for the aunt, okay, the uncle's wife. Now, what had happened though was the aunt was a second wife, okay? As frequently happens, the second wife is a tad bit younger, and go from there. But so what we have is the nephew and the aunt are within a year of one another's age. He doesn't get his 51% control until the aunt dies. She's probably going to outlive him. He's never going to get it. The aunt was not getting distributions out of the business. Why wasn't she getting distributions out of the business? Because this is a This is an industry in which we operate, right? Where we get the opportunity about every 7 years to lose everything we've ever made, right? It's a very cyclical business, right? So we've got to keep working capital in the business. Well, the aunt had no background in not only this business, but no business whatsoever. And she was hiring a series of attorneys that was suing the dealership, okay? During the last 12 months, you got to realize there was 8 years of fighting going on. Legal fees on both sides. The dealership in its last year spent $600,000 in legal fees, okay, on this matter alone, okay, and that was the last year. The aunt, the step aunt, if you will, okay, was spending more than that. This was insane. The entire family's wealth was going to the law firms, right? So we stepped in and we said, all right, how can we do this? We started looking at an ESOP, selling it to the employees, if you will, getting this all resolved, getting some cash to the aunt, the step aunt that way. That didn't happen. We had done evaluation, because part of what I said on the other slide was we've got to monetize this, whatever our investment is. My pointer's not working. And we got to figure out what the funding is going to be and how much this thing's worth. And so my point here is well, we did evaluation in planning purposes. How much is this worth? What can we expect the aunt through the trust, the uncle's trust to get? Where are we going to be? Met with the dealer. I put a value out there. The dealer then gets a call from a broker, okay? Business broker. The business broker says, oh, I can sell the business for this. And it was a big number. I told you it was a large group. It was a big number, okay? My valuation was 25% higher than the number that the broker was saying, all right? Well, the first thing I think is, oh crap, I made a mistake, right? What did I do? I go back, I look at what I've done, both the financial attributes and the non-financial that make this thing attractive, went back to the dealer, had a meeting with him and said, no, I really think my number's right. He said, you think you're right? Yep. Then find me a buyer. So we found him 2 buyers, actually. Okay. We took the lesser of the two offers. We ended up clearing more than what my valuation was at the end of the time. And so make sure, as you're going through this planning, that you engage with professionals that know and understand your business. General business brokers out there are selling HVAC contractors, restaurants, beer distributorships, and so forth. So make sure that you get involved with somebody who understands this industry, okay, as you're going through there. At the end of the day, okay, we went to the closing. We sold the business. There was no plans to sell the business. We only sold the business because of the step aunt, okay, situation. At 57, 58 years old, the dealer didn't need to sell, didn't plan on selling, but he did sell, okay? Another dynamic, at 57, 58 years old, you got Junior, right? His son, who thinks he's going to be in the big seat in a few years, right? Again, Thanksgiving's around the corner. Thanksgiving dinner was, the Junior didn't talk to his father for a while after the transaction closed, because Junior thought he should be in the big chair, if you will. So that's, again, those dynamics that you have to get around, all right? They're financially set, okay? They got big money. It's a great closing. Everybody's financially set for several generations down the road here, okay? As long as it's not mismanaged. That's all good, but it's not what anybody really wanted, okay? Other than maybe the attorneys for the step aunt who wanted cashed out at that point, all right? Okay. Dealers resist this planning frequently for a number of reasons, okay? Some of those are just fear of death, okay? Just fear of facing what's going to happen. Some of it is, I don't really know what my succession is going to look like. I don't know who that successor is going to be. Either a successor leader is the biggest question. And that's where we spend a lot of time working on the development of these leaders. And then there's a cost to this too, which the cost to do this planning can be significant. But as I said in the last example, they were spending, the dealership alone was spend $600,000 the last year, okay, right up to closing. So we've seen too many times where many multiples of that have been spent in trying to, with the attorneys, if you will. Good planning guarantees that your family's going to keep the dealership if that's what you want, okay? A dealer who does a proper job of succession planning, including, most importantly, transferring leadership, okay? You guys are kind of getting this leadership transfer thing, that there are a lot of dealers that aren't doing this, right? I've hit on that point enough. That the dealer, if he's done all this, can ease into retirement with some pretty good confidence that his standard of living isn't going to drop, and that if he passes away, the family's not going to be saddled with problems, and so forth. We had another, I tell a lot of stories because we can learn from these stories, and they're impactful and they're real. It's not just reading a textbook, if you will. So we had a dealer down in Florida, Jerry, I'll call him Jerry. He didn't want his children to suffer the uncertainty that he did. Jerry's father started the dealership in 1955, but didn't plan for proper succession. Jerry worked at the dealership for years, and his future was really in limbo until he arranged a buy-sell deal with his father in 1981 that would allow him to ultimately own the dealership. In working with Jerry, he had to acknowledge that he won't be here forever, which was fine. He's going to decline in health at some point or pass away. It was upsetting for him, but and a difficult issue to address, but we did. And we got through it in a very business-like manner. But he felt in case something does happen to him, he didn't want his children to not have a piece of, he didn't want his children to go through what he did, where, so he wanted his children to have a peace of mind that we've done everything that we could, and we've looked at every aspect. Did I hear something? Okay. All right. About a year ago, with the manufacturer's approval, okay, with his mainline's approval, we started transitioning to Jerry's son, who is 33 and the store's general manager. Okay, trying to keep on track here. All right. Common mistake that we see dealers with is, thank you. No, he's out there, but I can get it done.
Okay, just make sure you confirm
I know
that you got it.
Thank you.
All
right. Common mistake is that we see is leaving the business to one child and the real estate to another without any guidance as to rent or the future of the lease terms. This often leads to arguments and difficulties between the siblings over rent rates and store improvements and so forth. While I like to give the siblings, if you will, the next generation down, if they're going to have ownership and you've got somebody who's actually running the store, I like to balance things out between, hey, the son, if you will, is going to get the dealership, the daughter, who isn't involved in the business, may get the real estate entity or get the cash flow from the real estate entity. My caution there is the son needs to control his destiny, with the dealership needs to control where it's going to be. So we give voting control to the son. We may give the income to the daughter, but we give voting controls so that the daughter or the daughter's husband can't evict the son from the building and put him effectively out of business. So the son needs to control his own destiny. Okay, what we see frequently is that without that proper structure, it becomes a major problem in the family. And whereas if the architect of the plan to begin with and the owner of the dealership had really thought this through, we could have avoided all of that. Okay. All right. All dealers have some sort of succession plan in place. Okay. And you see I've got green, yellow, and red. Okay. Green is the best of all possibilities. Is, hey, let's do this through our lifetime. Lifetime transfer of ownership interest in management responsibility. Again, I'm hitting on that management responsibility, and we'll talk some more about that as well. Second option is, I don't want to deal with all this. I'll have an estate plan, and that implements maybe some trusts and some things. But again, what's the story that I told about that big dealer group? The step-aunt got involved, and we've got a problem. Okay, so that's not ideal. Okay, and then the bottom one is, yeah, let the kids worry about it. I'm not going to do anything, and we'll let the kids worry about it. Well, that is a plan. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the optimal plan. So as we go through succession planning, okay, there are a few things to keep in mind. All right. First is monetizing or converting the business wealth to assets that can be used to fund the owner's retirement. Okay. The second is transferring ownership in the business to the desired successors at the right price. The business may be worth all this, okay? But the next generation of owners and the business maybe only be able to fund this. So we got to work around that somehow. And we've got to make sure that we're happy with that, because now we're at a crossroads, right? Got a business worth this if I sell it on the open market, but if I sell it on the open market, my family members might be without jobs, okay? They're going to be working for somebody else. That may not be what Junior wants to have happen. He thinks he's going to be in the big chair and wants to be in the big chair, right? So we've got to have those discussions. Where we come in on that often is having those difficult discussions, basically playing referee to some extent, okay, and saying, hey, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about it in a business fashion. We're going to deal with the emotions. We're going to deal with everything so that we get to the right answer for the family group, okay? At the end of the day, as the owner, it's your decision. I have been involved 2 of the 4 transactions that we closed the week of the Super Bowl. Junior was working in the business. We went through a planning process with the dealer. I'm just going to take one of them. He's up in the Toledo area. We met with the dealer. We worked through it. We identified pretty quickly, because what we do is we do some assessments of Junior and other leaders, other perceived leaders, to determine whether they actually have the ability, people skills, soft skills and hard skills, to actually get the job done if Dad's not there. So we go through those assessments. We find out pretty quickly that Junior just really isn't capable. Not a fun discussion to have, right? Junior, you're just not the guy to run this. The reason we had to have that discussion is pretty much 100% of Dad's wealth is tied up in the dealership. Small retirement plan, insignificant. At age 62, Dad's going to live, we're living a lot longer, right? Going to live, Mom and Dad are both living. Mom and Dad are going to live probably into their 90s, another 30 years. With a small 401k plan, how do you get there? I've got to monetize, as I was just saying, I've got to monetize. I've got to figure out how I'm going to live into the future. And if I'm going to transition this to Junior, I got to do it at the right price and under the right structure. In that scenario, we determined that if Dad took a note back, was going to rent the property, take maybe some deferred comp, and get paid that way out of the store. That was fine, as long as the store continued to operate profitably. Here's the problem. Our assessment of Junior can't do this. So now your risk is, Pop, at 62, let's roll forward, maybe this thing limps along for 3, 4, 5 years, so you're 65, 66, 67, and Junior's killed the company. Now what are you going to do? How are you going to live for the remaining 25 years? So the tough decision was made, and it wasn't a tough decision, it was a tough discussion. The decision, as I brought it to the dealer, saying, you know, I don't think Junior can do this, he was in 100% agreement. When we talked through it, he just had never talked through it, especially with Junior. So we had the easy decision made, we had the tough discussion that we had to go through. Now, before we got to the decision of selling the store, what we did was we said, wait a minute, now Junior could still own this, and maybe he'll develop into more than what we think he is. I've been surprised before at the performance of people, okay? So our discussion was, okay, who else in the dealership can operate this thing and make it go in your absence? And maybe they get a small ownership to keep them involved, okay? So we give them a 15% of the store or something, or they have an opportunity to buy some, so forth, to keep them involved. Is there anybody there? And there wasn't. This was driven, the sales, about 85%, if I remember correctly, of the sales, whole goods sales, were directly related to Dad, okay? He was the top salesman. He was making sure everything happened. Well, without him, nobody had built, or because of his domination of the operations, nobody had also developed those leadership skills. So, first we've got to figure out how we're going to monetize it. We've got a second, transfer ownership at the right price. We have, I would also caution, the third item to caution you on is treating the owner's children equitably. Okay? Equal and fair are not the same thing. I've got an easy example that I use, but treating all the family members as, I got 3 kids, you're getting a third, you're getting a third, you're getting a third of the business, you're getting a third, a third, a third of everything that we've got. That may be equal, but it's not fair. And the example that I use is, what if one of those 3 children is a special needs child? Okay? You certainly aren't being fair if these 2 can earn a living and this one is going to have nursing or special care for the rest of their life. You wouldn't ever say, no parent would ever say, that's the right thing to do. Well, we've got that same situation in the business realm. The 2 sons, the earlier example that I used, the 2 sons that were in the business and the one that was a farmer. It's absolutely unfair to give the farmer a third interest, or his grandkids an interest in the dealership, when the other 2 sons had worked in it their entire life. There needs to be recognition, I believe, of the sweat equity that next generation down may have built or may build in the business. As I said, the nephew in the one case where the step-aunt was involved, he'd been running the thing for a dozen years prior to the uncle passing, and for 8 years after that. Okay, he should be rewarded for the growth and so forth under his watch. We also need to pay attention to strategic planning for the business's success after the transition, with primary focus on choosing and grooming a management successor to successfully run the business. Okay, hold on. We've got about 3 minutes left. And what I want to talk about is this concept of training your leaders. we've actually worked pretty hard on this over the years. And we've developed, through the help of the Dealer Association, some training courses we've developed to do this. Some of them are webinars and so forth. So what we do in the process of identifying the key members of management that need to be retained and how to retain them. And we've developed a Leadership Development Institute to develop their skills. So the first thing that we do is we do assessments. And some of those are those psychological assessments and so forth to determine whether they're the right people, Myers-Briggs and so forth. Then we start coaching them to improve their skills where they need improved. And this coaching can come through a mentoring process of the existing dealer. Sometimes the existing dealer doesn't have the right skills as well. We need to be careful about that. We also recognize that the workforce is changing, right? How many of you have millennials that work for you? Okay. I own 2 millennials, my son and my daughter, okay? They are different, the way they think, the way they operate. It's less about the pay, it's more about the time and so forth that they have. So working with that next generation, they're going to have to work with the millennials and that mindset a whole lot differently. So we're training a lot of soft skills there. We are then moving forward, we're training the hard skills as well for these people in this leadership development. They have to know how to interact with the manufacturer and how to push back on the manufacturer when the manufacturer is making unreasonable expectations of you or demands. And oftentimes they don't know how to do that, and they don't understand their rights under various state laws or under their contracts and their obligations under those same things. So we're teaching those items as well. One of the key elements that we have in this process of identifying and retaining these key leaders is that mentoring step with the existing dealer. It's very important that we allow enough time so that the existing leadership can run them through the paces, if you will. Teach them the ropes of the business. And oftentimes the leaders that are identified have come up through sales, okay? The whole good sales, but they have no concept of how the rest of the business operates. Whether it's the legal side, whether it's the HR side, or whether it's parts and service. Yeah, they've been in the dealership for years, but they don't really know how parts and service actually operates. And rental, if you're in rental, and so forth. So it's very, very important that we have enough of an opportunity, time-wise, to work through this transition, this succession plan with leaders, the leadership succession plan. And then finally, oftentimes if it's a non-family member, we are developing bonus programs. Maybe it's a bonus based upon the return on investment. Maybe it's a phantom stock plan. These concepts we could spend all day talking about, so totally a different topic for a different day. But you have to cement them. You have to glue them to your business, and that's oftentimes done through rewards that are down the road, rewards, if you will. Okay. We have come to the end of the session. I am here. I'll be right outside at the association booth, EDA's booth. If anybody has any questions, if you have any questions right now, please come up and see me. Other than that, enjoy the show. GIE+EXPO is a fantastic event. Thank you, everyone.